Hello and welcome to a special edition of 10 Lessons Learned. During this program, we're going to try out a new format and we'd really like to know what you think of this. We'll dive into our archive of more than 100 episodes and more than 1,000 lessons learned from our distinguished guests. We want to focus today specifically on big themes and wisdoms that have been shared by our guests globally. My name is Robert Hossary, and I'm joined today by my co-host Diana White. Hi, Diana.
Hi, Robert.
Today we'll be delving into the topic of self-awareness, and we hope you enjoy this new format. There's still a lot of untapped value in our ever-growing library of 10 lessons learned. Please comment, let us know what you think, and let us know if you want us to continue this format. So let's dive straight into it. Diana, before we start, I'd like to preface this whole episode with a poem. The poem is by Dale Wimbrough, and it was written in 1934. And this particular poem changed my life when I first heard it. So with your indulgence, ladies and gentlemen, and Diana, the poem is called A Man in the Mirror. When you get all you want, and you struggle for pelf, and the world makes you king for a day, then you go to the mirror and look at yourself, and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your mother, your father, or wife whose judgment upon you must pass, but the man whose verdict counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. He's the fellow to please, never mind the rest, for he's with you right to the end. And you know, when you've passed the most difficult test, if the man in the glass is your friend, you may be like Jack Horner and chisel a plum and think you're a wonderful guy, but the man in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look at him straight in the eye. You can fool the whole world down the highway for years and take pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. Diana, what do you think?
I think that is very powerful. I really, really do. And it's going to make me think about what I see when I look in the mirror differently now. It really is.
I heard that when I was when I was in my 20s. And I took it literally. And obviously, I understood the metaphor and what it stood for. But I took it literally and I started looking in the mirror hard and seeing the flaws in the character that was looking back at me. And then I realized very quickly, I didn't actually like myself. And it wasn't until I learned the respect that you need to have for yourself that only then can change occur in you.
I absolutely agree. I recently took I won't say it was a class. Let's say it was a webinar series, if you will, done by a brilliant man. And it talked about, and we actually are going to cover a lesson that speaks to this. It talks about your inner demons and your inner saboteurs, and how when you look in the mirror and you look at yourself and you look inward, right? You know the truth. And that feeling that you have about yourself, no matter what you portray to the world, no matter how much bravado you put on, you know the truth. And if you can't sit well with yourself, if those demons and those saboteurs cloud your mind with clutter and noise, there's no way you can be a better you. There's no way you can even begin to be a better you if you're letting them rule what goes on in your mind. And so I love that poem. I think I'm probably going to put that up next to my mirror going forward. I love it.
So what have you got for us, Diana, on self-awareness?
Well, you know what? Since we're talking about that man in the mirror, why don't we start with a lesson from Stephen Zylstra? It was lesson number 2, and it literally says, know the man in the mirror. And I think that is so powerful.
Unfortunately, many also know more about others than they do about themselves. Self-reflection is a very important thing. Everyone should know their own weaknesses as well as their strong suits. We gain skills and knowledge over the course of our career. And if we work to our strengths, we'll be happier in our job. And that's really what leads to longevity in any job is the fulfillment and the happiness that we have. But the learning shouldn't be career centric. Develop new skills through your life. We're all hearing over and over again the importance of lifelong learning. None of us ever know everything. We can always learn something new. And I think knowing yourself and understanding those strengths and weaknesses is a critical characteristic you need to be successful.
You know, some of the things that he talked about in there, self-reflection is key. Learning to work with your strengths. I love that he said learning shouldn't always be centered around work. That was a big one for me. And I got goosebumps because, as you know, I'm a lifelong learner inside and outside of the workplace. What do you say, Robert?
Look, I'm a great believer. I'm a great believer in self-awareness. It hit me when I was, before I was 10. And I remember this vividly, that I realized that people have thoughts that are different to mine. And it made me start looking inwards. And I haven't stopped. And every day I find out something new about myself, something that's either motivating me or preventing me from doing something. So I agree with Steve. Look in the mirror, understand who you are, understand what your buttons are, why you do things, the why. And many of our guests have talked about the why. Find out what your why is. And you can only do that by looking inwards and not being afraid of what you find, because some of what you're going to find is not nice. But
I agree with you.
It's you. So you need to know what's not nice and see. And it's a choice. Do you want to change that, or do you not give a shit? Basically.
It's the truth, right? And that kind of segues into the next lesson. Borsma, his lesson number 8. It's tough to beat one's demons.
I suppose that we're all struggling a bit with our own demons, and we're struggling with others that represent demons that talk to a particular part in our own lives and our life stories that we're still struggling with. And typically I've come to find out demons are actually indeed tough to defeat. At earlier stages in life, you think you can declare victory by doing something and then declare the demon dead. But very often you find it will resurface in your life, and you need to make your peace with that demon. You can learn to live with it because you start to know yourself better.
Anyway, you're looking in that mirror and you have to see the things you don't want to see and hear the inner voices that you don't want to hear. Sometimes it's easier to just go numb. It's easier to just go numb, tune it out, and just go about your day the way you were going. Nobody has to know that this conversation happened with me in the mirror. Nobody has to know. But you know what? It's okay. It's okay to have demons. It's okay to acknowledge them. When you acknowledge them, you give them less power. When you say, I see you, I see that fault in me, I see that insecurity in me, and it's okay because I'm human.
That's so incredibly important. If you acknowledge your flaws, your demons, you remove their power. I know some of mine. I mean, I've got a lot, and I know some of mine. And I know full well what I can do to combat them. Now, do I choose to combat them, or do I not choose to combat them? You know what? No, nobody's business but mine. But I know what they are. And it's powerful to be able to identify them and to make that choice, because the choice gives you power and removes the power from your flaws and your demons. Look, Diana, I don't think there's going to be much when it comes to this topic that I'm going to disagree on. This is something that I have lived, and I think Bass is absolutely spot on. It's hard to fight your own demons, but you can. All you have to do is admit that you have them.
And I want our viewers and listeners to understand that you're not going to look in, it's not going to be a fairy tale thing, right? You're not going to look in the mirror and say, I see you, demon. You don't have any power anymore. We're done. Hit the bricks, right? They'll come back in different forms. As we grow as humans, new demons arise. old demons may come back that we're like, what are you doing here? Well, you said that you weren't going to date anymore because you felt like the dating pool was horrible, but there you are on your first date again. So here I am. I'm back to tell you all the things you don't like. That kind of stuff is going to happen, right? So don't think that you're going to get rid of all those demons and you're going to find some kind of euphoric state that you will walk through for the rest of your life. That is the human condition, and understand it.
I think it's important to say that we use the term demons, but really we're talking about your personality.
Yeah.
This is a trait. This is a trait within your personality.
And
it's not going away.
I will go even deeper than that and say, ultimately, at the end, it's your insecurities.
Oh, definitely your insecurities.
It's your insecurities.
It's a defense mechanism.
I love
agree.
it.
Yep.
All right. Now, I want to talk about Eric Miller's lesson. Eric Miller, lesson number 5, know your own bias.
It's really good. It's interesting. It's come up very recently in that because I don't have enough to do. I'm actually taking a class on writing, and we're learning to read right now, and we're sharing our analysis of the chapter, and everybody has a completely different point of view on what the author's trying to say. And it just brought home that we're all bringing our biases, right? So, my bias, the way I look at things is from the view of an engineer, is very matter of fact and very logical. There's ghosts in this story. So there's no such thing as ghosts. So therefore the author is saying that, our own imagination fills in these gaps, and other people are like, ghosts are such an important part of the ecosystem and blah, blah, blah. And it just has to do with your biases and where your point of view comes from. And that's so true in business, right? Because you can be in a negotiation, or you could be trying to get a project done, and where you set your priorities and how you respond is so based on your bias. And it may not be where you want to go. Your goals may be over here and your bias is driving you over to the left. You got to be aware of it and be conscious of it and adjust and sometimes ignore that bias.
Yeah, well, it was a wonderful episode. This was wonderful, a wonderful lesson. And it's just so on point for today's topic. Knowing your own bias. It goes back to looking in the mirror. It goes back to recognizing your own demons. This is all the same thing, people. Knowing your own bias. And can I share a quick anecdote?
Absolutely.
So I went from running the American Chamber of Commerce here in Australia to working for a disability charity. And I didn't realize until maybe 6 months into that new role that I had an unconscious bias against people with disabilities, not because I thought any less of them, but because I was afraid of how I was going to interact with them.
Wow.
And every day, Tim, who was in his 50s and had Down syndrome, would come into my office and talk about the jeans he was wearing or show me his shoes. And I quickly realized that these are just wonderful people who just happen to be living with a disability. The person with a real disability was me, who would avoid them.
But
once I recognized that, Diana, I had a wonderful relationship and a great time working with these people and this charity.
I love what you just said. And I want viewers and listeners to hear between the lines, so to speak. Because I think a lot of us do that, where you say somebody has a bias and you automatically assume that it's a negative connotation. But sometimes the bias is, I'm uncomfortable and I don't know how to act or interact. And that is a bias, but it's not an evil bias. It's not a bad bias. It's an uncomfortableness and a lack of knowing. A lack of knowledge.
Yeah, absolute lack of knowledge. Our guest is spot on there. Know your biases, know what your own issues are. And you can't do that without being self-aware and understanding who you are. Take the time, people, to know the person that you're living with for the rest of your life, which is you.
So true. You can't get away from yourself, no matter how hard you try. I want to go on to Narelle Hooper. Lesson number 6. Put your oxygen mask on first before helping others.
Yeah, look, with Narelle, when that lesson came up and I was editing, I thought, this is pretty cliche. And then I listened to what she had to say, and it dawned on me that it's, while the saying is cliche, the meaning behind it is not. You can't help others without understanding and helping yourself first.
Yeah. You
And
cannot give from an empty cup.
Oh, I like that one.
You can't. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So let me give a scenario, if you will. You've got 5 people that need you, 5 people that need your help, but you can't help them all together. You can only help them one at a time. And your cup, you haven't taken any time to replenish your own soul, your own cup. And so you go to the first person and they get 2 drops. And you look in the cup and there's a half a drop left. And you go to the second person and you give them that half a drop. Now you and the other 3 people are shit out of luck. Right? You can't do anything else. And the first 2 people you helped didn't even get enough. They didn't even get enough because you had nothing to begin with.
Exactly right. So, Narelle, if you're watching this, we agree with you.
We do. And I will say, Narelle, if you're watching this, I absolutely agree with your other point, which is start at home. We talk on these global issues, and they're important, and we need to see ourselves as global citizens. But you'll have people that talk about what's going on in the world, and they don't even know that their neighbor is lonely. And I love that she talked about that. So Narelle, thank you. Thank you for that lesson. And that's going to lead us to the last lesson I want to talk about today. This one really got me, something I believe in. Vikas Tiku.
Mm-hmm.
His lesson number 10, be humble. Nobody knows everything.
I'm pretty sure it was Aristotle. Could have been Socrates. Probably Socrates. That said, "'Tis a wise man who knows he knows nothing." And I have been wise for a long time because I know nothing.
Well, I love what he said. He said, there's a difference between confidence and just thinking you know everything and not being willing to be humble enough to listen to somebody else's opinion or a different perspective on what you thought you saw, because know your own bias. I enjoyed that episode and I enjoyed that lesson. I really wanted to wrap up our talk with that because I think it's what 10 lessons is all about.
Absolutely.
I really do.
Particular lesson, Diana, took me back to being a teenager. Not only did I know everything, I was invincible. I was going to live forever. No one could teach me anything. What an absolute dickhead I was.
Well, I remember when it was time to go to university. And my girlfriends, we had all picked a university. And we stayed there for a 4-day weekend and stayed in the dorms, and everybody was excited. And I chickened out. And I said, viewers and listeners, let me explain that this was originally 10 lessons. It took me 50 years to learn. So I'm a little older. And so I said, I remember as clear to this day, why I'm not going to go to college. I'm already making $3.75 an hour. That was a lot of money back then, folks. I was already making $3.75. I don't need to go to college. I'm on my way. And to see my friends go through university and come out and get these high-paying jobs, and how's retail doing, Diana? And I'm like, well, now I'm making $6.75 an hour. You do think you know everything when you're that age.
Oh, yeah.
And you do think you have it all figured out. And you're obstinate with people that try to tell you, kid, listen, I've been there. You don't want to hear that. You haven't been where I've been. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why I gravitated towards this show so much, because it flies in the face of that. I don't need to learn. Every single day, it makes people remember you've always got something new to learn, and you've always got something new to teach somebody.
Well, this is one of my lessons when I was on the show, which is you can always learn from anybody, even if it's how not to do something. It's important that you open yourself up to new experiences. It's important that you realize that you don't know anything. And it wasn't too long ago, I was redoing the website for the American Chamber. And the web designer, and you got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, this was in the early 2010s. The web designer says, well, it's going to cost you an extra $5,000 for the mobile version of it. And I thought to myself, who the hell looks at websites on their mobiles? But to my credit, I walked out of my office and I asked my team, who looks at their website on the mobile? Every hand went up. I went back into my office, called the web designer, and said, you've got your money, make it happen.
You did your
because
research.
I realized that just because I don't do it doesn't mean other people don't do it. And that is a lesson, believe it or not, I learned from my wife, who said to me, sweetie, just because you can do it doesn't mean other people can do it. And that works in reverse too. Just because you don't do it doesn't mean other people don't do it. So you're right, Diana. You can only get to these places that Diana and I have been talking about today if you believe in yourself, if you look deeply enough to realize what your limitations are, what your strengths are or skills are, and make that determination that you're going to continue to learn, that you don't know everything. This is important. And this is probably one of the most powerful lessons I've learned in my career, in my life. And I continue to learn. And that's why we do 10 lessons. Because every episode that we do, I learn something new.
So
and
do
I'm
I.
not a young man, people. I am not a young man.
Neither am
Not
I.
old, but no, I'm sure you're not a young man, Diana.
Oh, Robert. Audience, we want you to know at 10 Lessons, we really, truly are a family and we have fun with each other. And you don't see the behind the scenes, how excited we get when we talk about the episodes, when things really strike us. It's one of the reasons why we decided to test this series, to see if we can give you a glimpse into how we feel about each other's episodes and these lessons that we learn. We have a blast when we have our meetings talking about some of these lessons and epiphanies. And sometimes they're not fun. Sometimes they really make us look at ourselves and challenge what we think we know. And I want to say, in all honesty, I hope it does that for you too. I hope our viewers and listeners get the same range of a roller coaster emotions that we do, because then that means we're doing something right.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Diana. And, you know, it's a mission that we're all on, and we're very proud of what we do. So with that, I would like to thank you, Diana, for joining us and for leading this conversation. And I'd like to thank our audience. You've been listening to a special episode of 10 Lessons Learned. Our mission on 10 Lessons is to focus on wisdom and permanent knowledge. It's not so much about current affairs or the stock market options or politics. No matter how relevant these issues are, our goal here at 10 Lessons is to capture lessons from our guests and share them as far and wide as possible. We hope you enjoyed the show. We will include the guest names and links in the show notes. Please don't forget to leave us a comment or review and tell us how you like this new format. You can also email us at podcast@10lessonslearned.com. I hope you'll subscribe so you don't miss any of our regular episodes or any of these new episodes. If a majority of our audience likes it, we'll continue to make them. And remember that this is the only show on the internet that makes the world wiser. Diana?
Lesson by lesson.
Thanks for watching. See
Bye,
you in the next
everybody.
episode.